Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. So I'm going to continue my controversial series. Previously I'd done videos about buying the title of Lord, Laird, Lady through such groups as Highland Title or Dunnan's Castle. But I've also taken some time and been involved with something else that isn't the title of Lord, Lady, or Laird, and that is the whole question of ordination and purchasing or becoming ordained online through the Universal Life Church and the Universal Life Church Monastery. They're actually two separate entities. Universal Life Church goes back a long way. I believe there's a whole legal issue that I'm not going to get into around the Universal Life Church and the Universal Life Church Monastery. Anyway, but we'll talk about some details. But the whole question of being ordained online. And this has caught the attention of a lot of people because a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll actually get ordained online in the United States in order to perform weddings. It's actually one of the primary reasons that they do it. But I wanted to delve into this a little bit and talk about, the whole practice. Is it legitimate? Is it a scam? Those sorts of things. And so let's dig into this a little bit. First of all, before we start, I have actually been ordained through other organizations. So in the past, I was ordained as a bishop, and here's my certification. The Alberta Conference of Christian Orders. I was ordained as a bishop along the lineage of former Roman Catholic Bishop Costa Duarte, who was a Roman Catholic bishop, and then he founded a church later on in Brazil, if I'm not mistaken, and his lineage continues on into the States and to various Catholic communities that are offshoots, but the apostolic lineage is transferred along. And my ordination was done in person. It was done by the laying on of hands by somebody who had their ordination laying on of hands, and the appropriate prayer of consecration is recognized by the Roman Catholic Church and other churches. And so there's a sense of legitimacy to that ordination because it followed that lineage and it followed that tradition in terms of the process. So I just want to put that out there. And also, I'm a Buddhist, so I'm following the Plum Village tradition, which I've not been ordained to the Order of Interbeing, but I have received the 5 mindfulness trainings, which is kind of like, I kind of equate it somewhat to like baptism and confirmation to a certain extent. And I have also received Jukai in the Soto Zen tradition, which is like, they call it a lay ordination. So I have been ordained in person in a few different communities. I don't really practice the Christian element that much, although there's going to be some stuff coming on that too. And I'll be doing a separate video about the Buddhism-Christianity relationship and possibly bringing something together for that. But anyway, I wanted to talk today about ordaining through the Universal Life Church and the Universal Life Church Monastery. So, as you can see, I have my certificate. I did, in fact, go through the online process, which was free when I went through it. I don't know whether that it is still there, so sorry, I showed you the wrong certificate. I gave you a little bit of a jump ahead. That's my certificate of ministry. I paid $10 for the certificate, but I believe the ordination was free. And then I had also actually ordained through the original Universal Life Church and requested their credential, just so there's no misunderstanding about that. So I was ordained through Universal Life Church and the Universal Life Church Monastery. Now, like I said, this has been a bit of a contentious issue for some people. Is it real? Is it isn't? Is it not? And I wanted to delve into the question. In terms of theologically, well, we'll deal with legal first, and then we'll get into the legitimacy. Both organizations, the Universal Life Church Monastery and the Universal Life Church, do have legal status. In other words, they are actually churches registered in the United States. As far as I know, nobody has registered in Canada, them as a church in Canada. I could be wrong there, though, because it's entirely possible. In the province of Alberta, where I live, if I were to actually register a something where a church, let's say. I wanted to start some sort of ministry. I wanted to start some sort of church or religious organization. It's actually very easy for me to do so. There are legal reasons why I couldn't call myself the Universal Life Church Monastery or the Universal Life Church or Ministries. I'd have to call myself something else. But in terms of creating an actual church, it's actually really easy. I've helped other organizations become religious entities in the province of Alberta, and in the States, it's also a very easy process. You have to fill out some paperwork. Sometimes you need your bylaws, etc., and bing, bang, boom, you need to, a description of, what you believe and your religious tenets and who you're affiliated with, all that sort of stuff. Or if you're starting a new denomination, you declare that as well. But it's actually very easy to become a church. For really a small group of people to become a religious entity, both in the United States and in Canada. And although to my knowledge, and I could be wrong about this, nobody in Canada has really done anything established sort of any sort of affiliate status with the Universal Life Church Monastery, Universal Life Church. In the States, it is legal. It's recognized as a religion, it's recognized as a church. So right there, in terms of a legal sense, it is real. Law permits churches to actually ordain anybody that they so choose by any manner they so choose, provided that they, give a statement. There is some question, and there have been some legal cases in the States, as to whether, for the purposes of being able to marry people, an online registration or ordination is sufficient. But I will say that in most, I don't think all, but in most states in the United States, if you go through the proper process, through, ordaining and getting the marriage package and all the letters and et cetera that you need, there are a number of places in the States where the Universal Life Church Monastery Universal Life Church credential is actually sufficient to be able to be considered clergy for the purposes of marrying people. That is not the case in Canada. In Alberta, where I'm at, people can apply to be temporary marriage commissioners. As it turns out, I did it for my first time yesterday, and I married my cousin and his wife. But it was not a religious ceremony. It was a civil ceremony only. In order to become religious clergy, there's actually a much higher bar in Canada that you have to meet in order to become religious clergy. Could you, with ordination through the Universal Life Church and creating an entity in Canada, get to that point? The answer is yes. You could actually, it just takes a lot longer, and it does take involvement from other people. So you can't just have a community of one. You'd actually have to be able to demonstrate you have an active and vibrant religious community. Numbers kind of ebb and flow, but you have to be able to demonstrate that you're a viable and continuing religious organization for at least 3 years in Alberta, and then you can apply for a clergy status. Now, I have not done that. I have not done that with my Universal Life Church monastery credentials, and in a sense, it's almost irrelevant in Canada, because when you're not actually officially tied to the Universal Life Church and the Universal Life Church Monastery, it's whatever you created in Canada that would serve as the church. So to a certain extent, in the States, while the credential of being ordained through the Universal Life Church and Universal Life Church Monastery may actually help you to be able to perform weddings in Canada, it is not applicable. However, that being said, it doesn't mean that it's not a pathway forward where you can develop that. And so, is it real? Then the answer really is yes. Certainly in the States it is. I don't know what the rules are in other countries, but in terms of being regarded as a minister, yes. In the United States, it's definitely a real thing. Even though it's the brunt of jokes and it's been on late night talk shows, etc., as a brunt of a joke, it is a real thing. And so in most states, not all, but in most states, you're able to perform weddings with the credential of the Universal Life Church. And there's a bit of a doorway in Canada if somebody were seriously going to pursue something like that. Theologically, well, really, religion's one of those things that's the eye of the beholder, right? It's a little bit different from the landholder title, where sort of everybody agrees on real property versus, souvenir plots, that sort of thing, where there's actually legal recognitions. When it comes to this, it's in the eye of the beholder. So it's completely up to you how you decide to proceed forward. I would argue that if you go through the process and you actually start acting like a minister and even start getting some people that are interested in what you're saying and doing, I say it's legit. I say it's a real thing. And so you can really start a foundation with that. You could start a religious society in Canada and definitely in the United States. It's a lot easier in the United States with constitutional protections being much more definitive in terms of freedom of religion than it is in Canada, which is just a reality. It's not that we don't have it here, but just the way that the legal structure is, it's much more entrenched and protected in a certain way than it is in Canada. So that's an important thing. Now, there's some other pieces that come along with Universal Life Church, Universal Life Church Monastery. I took it a step further. So not only did I get ordained, and not only is my ordination valid with the Universal Life Church, which means I could probably apply in some states anyway to do weddings in the United States, I went further, and this was the first one. I got a Doctorate of Divinity for $29. So I ordered that from the Universal Life Church Monastery, and people are now going to be like, really? Really? Is it legit? Well, let's delve into that piece a little bit. It depends who you ask. In the United States and Canada, the degree, Doctor of Divinity, is actually an honorary one in most cases. There might be some exceptions in the States, but I believe throughout Canada it's an honorary one. And just as an example, in the Roman Catholic Church, when one is ordained a bishop, one automatically receives the honorary doctorate. They get to put the letters after their name as a bishop in the church. They get the DD designation. They don't necessarily have to do anything special or have any academic credentials otherwise to do it. They're just allowed to put it on the end of their name. And so if it's good enough for the Roman Catholic Church, I argue that's good enough for the Universal Life Church Monastery. Because if they're going to allow you, if they're going to bestow that title upon you, you're not doing it on your own. It's the organization that's doing it. Some people may say that's a little dodgy. Call it an honorary degree. And you know, they're very specific on their website. It comes with no academic credential. It comes with no professional designation. It is simply an honorary name that is bestowed upon someone, and fill your boots from there. It's legit. There's a certificate and paperwork that goes along with it. So guess what? As far as I'm concerned, some people may accept it, other people might not. But guess what? From the status of equivalency between other churches and the Universal Life Church, I say it's a fair deal. Same goes with this. I got the title, I think this was like $10, Bishop through the Universal Life Church Monastery. Now, I had already been ordained as a bishop in a different lineage, but I went and got the official paperwork from the Universal Life Church Monastery. Is it legit? It's the same issue with the Doctor of Divinity. If that religious organization chooses to bestow that upon you, then it is legit, legally speaking, and you can call yourself bishop whatever you want. You can call yourself etc. Whether people will follow you, that's an entirely different thing, and that is a discussion that goes on from the biggest churches like the Roman Catholic Church to the smallest like the Universal Life Church Monastery. Do you recognize somebody as a religious authority? And that, my friends, is entirely in the eye of the beholder. As a society, we tend to lay in more credence to people that have large groups of followers that tend to buy into particular theological perspectives. But how many does it take? Does it take 2? Does it take 4? Does it take 6, 8, 10, 100? What's the limit? Well, guess what? That is in the eye of the beholder. That's entirely up to you. And so, to a certain extent, what is very different from, this particular group, the Universal Life Church Monastery and the Universal Life Church, is that it is all legal, but doesn't necessarily mean anything in terms of civil society. It's really up to the independent, other than, if it authorizes you to perform weddings and that sort of thing. like it does in many states in the States. But you don't need to buy the title bishop. You don't need to buy the title Doctor of Divinity from them. I guess donate money for those titles, I guess is what it is. And frankly, if you're actually donating money for an honorary doctorate, is it really all that different than if you build a building at a university and they give you an honorary doctorate? That's up to you to decide. The donation in that case just happens to be bigger. So is it legit? I'll let you decide that one. But anyway, I wanted to address this one because I am going to play around with this in some upcoming videos. I am going to play around with Universal Life Church stuff. I have done it in the past. I'm going to be probably doing some additional episodes and how one actually registers a religious community in Alberta, how one goes through registering clergy, etc. And who knows, maybe somebody will take the bull by the horns and decide to use their Universal Life Church monastery ministry credential to start working things up here. Again, it's not as easy as in the States because Universal, as far as I know, Universal Life Church monastery or Universal Life Church has not yet achieved any recognition in any of the Canadian provinces or territories. But it doesn't mean that it can't happen. So we'll just put a pin in that one and maybe come and do an episode later down the line. All right, everybody, take care. Thank you.